So I'm in the middle of actually completing an assignment for a crazy professor, my last assignment. And I just had this statement, not just right now, but 10 minutes ago, maybe 15 minutes ago, and I couldn't get it out of my mind, which is addiction is a concept to most therapists. Addiction is a concept to most people, but addiction is a concept to most therapists. And that makes sense because you learn it as a concept in a sense. You learn it as a theory. You learn what the symptoms are. You learn what the signs are. You learn what people have decided, certain people have decided what the treatment is for it. And when something only exists in your mind and your understanding as a concept, you approach it and you approach the people who are affected by it and you approach treatment theoretically rather than being able to sink into the human experience. I'll give an example. I've talked about this before on my page, but coping skills. Oh my gosh, don't get me started with coping skills. When relapse is discussed with most of these kinds of providers, the feedback or the line of questioning starts with, okay, well, what happened? Then it goes to, okay, what coping skills could you have used in that moment? Okay, so addiction is not really a formula. Addiction is a matter of building up strength to endure these really tormenting experiences of obsessive thoughts. A lot of people don't know this, and I haven't heard it said this exact way, but addiction is very similar to OCD in terms of the obsessive aspect of it. And you can't cope your way out of obsession. What you have to do is really go through times after times where you're thugging it out, and hopefully at some point you thug it out enough to where your body, your mind, your brain start to get used to being without it, and even that is difficult. It's not like, oh, you made it through the worst part the first few weeks or the first couple of months and now you're good. It's like, no, you made it through the first of all, it's very difficult to make it through even a week. How about you just think about going a week without eating the your staple food in your diet? People start freaking out when they take away a little bit of bread or some crackers. Okay, and people in that situation, they can usually start to get used to it, but many people can't. I would say most people can't. I mean, my whole life, family, friends, hearing people in public, they can't give up foods. And so imagine your body actually punishes you in a sense when you give up something, right? And so going back to the point, addiction as a concept, and you're discussing relapse and you're like, okay, what coping skills could you have used? That is just approaching addiction as this concept, because theoretically you think it's this formula and you're like, okay, if you do this and you do this, you could stay sober. You relapse because you didn't do this. Maybe what you didn't do kind of increased your chances of relapse, but you relapse because your mind got your eyes were covered, your mind got consumed with these thoughts of using. Maybe your body started to really like crave it. Maybe you couldn't get the thought of your mind, like you were coping all day, coping through work, coping through using the bathroom, coping through taking a shower, coping through driving somewhere. And then the pressure built up significantly. And so, really, the most important thing in those situations is really to have people around you who could just either hug you, hold you, just be there for you, just be an emotional support to help distract you in a sense from all that pressure building up. And so the coping part of it is not all these random skills that maybe put a little sprinkle of water on the fire. But what needs to happen is being in such a being so connected to support, being so connected to people who either get it or people who love you so much that they're not going to judge you. They're just going to be there with you in those really hard moments. when you just understand addiction as a concept and you cannot relate to it as an experience, or you can't humble yourself enough to relate to it as an experience, because another barrier to connection with people who are in active addiction or in addiction recovery is that lack of experience, or that lack of humility to put yourself at the same level as them. Because let's get real, people come into the field of addiction treatment, or what they understand in their minds of addicts is very dysfunctional behavior. This is very, very true. And certain populations in the spectrum of being chemically dependent have some unique struggles. So there is a level of dysfunction, and because you see these people as dysfunctional, you just think it's their dysfunctional behavior, and all of that is the reason they can't be successful. There's an aspect of that. Yeah, there's some dysfunctional thought patterns that make it harder to recover, but addiction is not a concept. It's an experience where you are chained mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally to something that maybe you don't want to let go of, but you know you should, or maybe you do want to let go of it, but you just cannot. So I'm just going to leave it there, because this is a high level concept and some people are just going to think I'm rambling, but there's a difference between a concept and an experience. And if you just understand something as a concept and you haven't experienced it, you need to humble yourself, because this is the real barrier. People think, well, subconsciously, and sometimes consciously, but a lot of times subconsciously, well, if I was in that situation, I would have just used X coping skill. I would have just breathed, meditated. I would have just went to a meeting. I would have just did this and that, taken a shower, went to the beach. That's when you understand as a concept. When you can humble yourself and relate to something as an experience that you haven't directly experienced, here's the difference in the thought process. You think, wow, that is a terrible, terrifying experience, and I can't imagine how lonely that felt. It's a lack of connection is the issue, especially if you live alone or the people you're with don't relate to you because they understand it as a concept and not an experience. You don't feel accepted because you've always felt ostracized and stigmatized by society. So this is just me introducing the concept to you. And I want you to think about that. Get your wheels turning. Think about addiction not as a concept, but humble yourself to understand the experience. Thank you.